Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Willie Miles. I am the president of Dr. Willie Miles Children's Foundation, located in Atlanta, Georgia. And again, I want to thank each of you all for coming on every week to hear these live broadcasts. I want to thank our IG fans, our Instagram fans, and also I want to thank our Facebook followers, which is growing each week. Again, I'm Dr. Miles, and here in Atlanta, and I'll tell you a little about the foundation while Jackie is trying to log on. The foundation is a 501c3 located in Atlanta, and our goal really is to make children our priority, to make children our priority. And the reason we chose that mission, because we felt there were many organizations that were helping families, and they saw children as part of families. Well, we see children as a part of family also, but we believe in treating the child, because oftentimes families just don't, unfortunately, work out. And the child still has to survive once they get back into that household. So again, we make sure that everything we do is focused on enhancing the lives of children, enhancing the lives of children. We also solicit you all or ask you all to make donations to us. That's how we function. I don't get a salary from the foundation, nor does Jackie. We do this because we care. We do this because we care. And we're on every week, talking about parenting issues and talking about children's issues and focusing on mental health, So we're going to implore you all to dig a little deeper, send a donation to us. You go to our website at the Children's Foundation.net, hit that donation button and send a donation to us. I do want to share that things that are kind of interesting here in Atlanta this week. I should say this week is really today. It's like today's weather was 75 degrees. Tomorrow it's going to be 70. And then on Thursday, we're back in the 50s. So as my elders used to say, this is pneumonia weather. So I'm not sure what the weather's like in your area of the country, but I'm sharing with you here in Atlanta, it is summer one day, spring the next day, and winter the next day. But I'm not complaining because at least I can experience the 4 seasons in 1 week. I can experience the 4 seasons in 1 week here in Atlanta. I do want to say that this month has been a very interesting month for us in bringing topics of interest to you. This has been sort of our Black History Month, and I kind of scorn when I say that because Black history is every day, and you can't live without experiencing Blackness through our inventions. Be it medical, be it mechanical, whatever, we have been present. So I'll just say that February highlights Black history. And so Black History Month is coming to a closure on the 28th. I am going to say now, folks, it doesn't come to a closure unless you close it out. So I am hoping that you all live each day just talking about the importance and the significance of the Black experience in America, the Black experience in America. And we're going to lead into our topic tonight, talking about that what the Black experience brought to this country. Now, again, I want to make sure we're very clear on this. Because we love ourselves and our Blackness doesn't mean we hate anyone else. And people get that oftentimes misconstrued. They start thinking that if I love being Black, I must hate white folk. I have no idea what kind of rationale that is. It's just not rational. Because it would be something wrong with me if I didn't love myself. And there'd be something wrong with white people if they didn't love themselves. And there'd be something wrong with Latinos if they didn't love themselves. So every culture ought to love, take pride in, and take interest in fulfilling their culture, and making sure that their culture never dies. Their culture, the cultural mores, the cultural folklores, the cultural music, the cultural food never dies. Because when it dies, then the culture dies. When it dies, then the culture dies. I want to thank some folks for signing on with us. Robert, it's good seeing you again this weekend. Al Miller, it's good seeing you. Great. Grovius on Instagram, good seeing you. Virginia, and I thought I saw a few other people coming on. Oh, Corey is on. Yep. And I see, yeah, my cousin. Hey, B, how are you? From Mississippi, she's on. And we have a few others that are signing on. Well, I'm going to begin this program without Jackie. I mean, she may be stuck in traffic. You know, she's a principal at a school, so she gets off at 5 o'clock or 5:30, and she's probably trying to rush home to make sure that she can get on this live stream tonight because she really wants to talk about this topic tonight. But, you know, what's very interesting is that this topic is one that has fostered a lot of energy, across the country. It has fostered a lot of energy across the country. I want to put a pin there. I do want to share with y'all that I think next week we're going to take off. We've been doing this for months and I'm exhausted. So I think Jack and I will take off next week. We'll start up again the week after next. I think it's in March. So at this point, I'm going to go back now to what I was talking about. Critical race theory. Some people call it CRT. And the question is like, what is this CRT thing? What is this critical race theory? And it sounds so formal, doesn't it? Critical race theory. What is it? What does it mean? And why are people so afraid of it? Why are people so afraid of it? And why do people not want it to happen? And there are various reasons why people don't want it to happen. But let's talk about what it is. And folk, a lot of politicians are trying to make this feel very complex, convoluted, and they've made it political. They made it political. But folk, it's very simple. It is very, very simple. Critical race theory, and let's talk about the theory part. The theory simply means there are other perspectives. And so we're saying that with all the other perspectives, which has been his story, consider our perspective. So why is it everyone else's perspective can be considered in American history except the Black perspective? And so it is a conversation. It's a conversation on race. It's a conversation on race. Now, I was saying before, this is nothing new, folk. It's been around for almost 30 years. And so the question is, what is it? And why all the controversy? And I look forward to you all actually sharing your comments in our comment box. I'll be more than happy to read those. But I'm going to give you very simplistically what it is. Very simplistically what it is. Critical race theory is simply showing the relevance of race in America. The relevance of race. And there are some people who have you think that we live in a race-free society and nobody looks at that stuff anymore. Well, the devil's a liar. People still do look at that. And the Black experience, we experience it every day. So critical race theory is a viewpoint on race. And the viewpoint simply is, how does race impact education? How does race impact the judicial system? How does race impact our medical system? How does race impact everything? Y'all got it? That's what it is. That's what it is. Now, the irony of this is there are people who don't want critical race theory taught because it will teach the truth of America. The truth of America. And the truth of the significance of Black folk and Africans in this country. Are y'all feeling me? So there is the critical race theory that says we think that all children should be taught the relevance of race in America from all points of view. But this perspective is a Black perspective. Just like there is a white perspective that we experience every day in all our history books, Just like there is a Latino or Hispanic perspective that they develop on their own. But no one wants to consider the African, the Black experience, and the significance of our presence here in America. So that's that proponent who doesn't want that to be taught, folks. And what's so interesting about not wanting it to be taught, are you ready for this? It's because that it's a fear that I would do harm to white children and they would see themselves as villains. So I've given you the whole thing in 5 minutes. That's what it is. Now, people want to make more out of it than that, but guess what? There's no more to it. There is no more to it. Critical race theory is about teaching children and elementary, middle, high, and college level, collegiate levels. A true story from a race perspective. A race perspective. So I'm going to sort of like slow it down just a little and let you know that the idea of race has always played an important part in the United States history. Would you all agree? The idea of race does and has always played an important part in United States history, and it must be studied as such. There is a proponent of people who don't want it to be studied. Now, when you talk about that, when has academia been censored? Are y'all feeling me? When did we start censoring academia? Academia is teaching from all perspectives and letting people make up their minds about what they believe. Academia is being able to listen respectfully. You don't have to believe it, but at least listen respectfully. So this proponent of people believes that it should not be taught on any level, and it, for us, it's just a way of looking at our history. It's just a way of looking at our history and also telling the story from our perspective. Now, keep in mind that there's a body of people who believe that if this information were to get out in the schools, it would do harm to their children, but not considering the harm that is done to our children. See, to their children, it would be a mental impact. To our children, it has been a historically mental and physical impact. Not only mental and physical, but an economical and a sociological impact. So there's one group who says, don't teach it because my kids will feel bad about us. Let's stop for a second. Don't teach it because our kids will feel bad about themselves and their history based upon the atrocities that they caused to other people. For some reason, this has become a heavy debate across the country. Now, I'm getting some of this stuff I'm sharing with you. Some of the research I did is from Megan Aharon's article on what is CRT, or critical race theory. What is it? So I've given you all the backdrop of what CRT is. I've given you the backdrop of what critical race theory is. And I made it very simplistic for us. Critical race theory is a race or black perspective on the United States history and the significance and the pain and the terrorism that black folk and Africans suffered at the hands and by the hands of other human beings. That is what is being proposed to be taught on the elementary, middle, and high school levels and collegiate levels. The proponent of people who are against it are against it because they do not want their children to feel like villains and to see their ancestry as terrorist. That's what it's all about. All right. So the whole point about CRT, critical race theory, folks, this is not new. CRT was around 30 years ago, folks. We've always talked about the black experience. We've always talked about the impact that black folk have made on the United States of America. And we have to talk about it because black folk built this place. You see, others don't want to hear us talk like that. They call us activists and nationalists. But they don't call themselves that when they talk about it. See, this is not about liking white folk or disliking them. It's very simple. It's about the truth from a race or from a black perspective. Don't forget, theory is about perspectives. We've heard everybody else's theory about the United States, the theory about how whites discovered America. Are y'all with me? We have their perspective on who we are. We have their perspective on religion, food, culture, dress, how one should think and act. Their perspective. Critical race theory is strictly dealing with the United States from another perspective, and that is the black or African perspective. Deborah, thank you so much for your comments on Facebook. She says, because they were taught blacks are bad. And not only were they taught that blacks were bad, they were taught that blacks were evil and they could not learn and they were animals. And that's why they treated us this way. That's not a justification. It is their logic behind it. That we were subhuman, so we should be treated subhuman. We're subhuman, so we should be treated subhuman. The white perspective on critical race theory is that white parents argue that critical race theory would make their children feel bad about themselves, which simply means that critical race theory would impact their children's self-esteem. But there's no concern about critical race theory not being taught affecting the self-esteem of black children. Are y'all with me? So, we talk about critical race theory. To me, it's like we've always talked about race. What's interesting about this, at least I digress, is that people ask the question, can black people be racist? And my answer is, no, they can't. They can talk about white folk, but guess what? That's all they're going to do is talk. Their talk does not impact the social, economic, or psychological well-being of white people. So your racism is racist when it has impact. So black folk can dislike anybody. But guess what? Their dislike of other cultures has no impact because they don't decide that other cultures, economic levels, their educational levels, their housing, their medical, or anything. The question is, can whites be racist? The answer is yes, because their racism can impact jobs, it can impact where I live, it can impact where I eat, it can impact what I eat, it can impact my whole life. I'm just throwing this out for y'all. So when you talk about critical race theory and why do black folk want to talk about it? And the reason black folk want to talk about it is because black people want to make sure that our children understand it. And our children appreciate the contributions that we've made to America in a public setting. So in the classroom, black children can hear how smart they are and how wonderful they are and why sometimes they're in the conditions they're in. Now, if you're in a integrated classroom, of course, like many children are, you have black children, white children, Latino children. It's a diverse group. So this body of people are saying, as you're teaching things to pump your children up, it is tearing down our children. Well, I offer the same analogy. American history makes the white kids in that classroom feel real good because they used to own us. But it tears down black children. So in other words, what's good for your children ain't good for my children. So it's okay for my children to suffer and have a low self-esteem, but it's not good for your children to have that. Now, mind you, I don't think it's good for any child to have it. But what I'm doing is setting the foundation for you to deal with this issue of critical race theory. As I said before, everybody has politicized it, trying to make it seem so complicated, folk. But as long as there have been black folk on this in America, we've been dealing with critical race theory. We've always said somebody needs to teach our story. And there were several books that are written where the author said, hist, H-I-S, his story. Not our story, it's his story. And when you look at our history books of today, the history books are written from a different perspective. It's written from a critical race theory white perspective. And we're talking about a critical race theory from a black perspective. And all we're saying in the teaching is what's good for one child ought to be good for the other. What's good for one child in middle school ought to be good for all children in middle school. Because we think what would happen if white children and others began to understand the true story, what you'll find is a true merging of understanding and relationships and appreciation and respect. And you won't have this generational, you black, you ain't no good, you're dumb. And people, now we're not talking about just in the teaching arena, we're talking about in all institutions. Because the race theory impacts all institutions. We're talking about the justice system, the educational system, medical system, the homes. It affects communities. So y'all hear what the argument is about, right? Y'all hear what the argument is, and there's really no argument. And folks, guess what? Everybody acts as if this critical race theory just jumped off. Well, it didn't. It did not just jump off. And the reason it is so highlighted now is because we've witnessed the murder of many black unarmed folk. We've witnessed the murder of black children. At least I say, y'all heard about Emmett Till. a child who was killed by two white men. And this is not trying to instill anger. It's just the truth, folk. It is just the truth. This is what critical race theory is all about. What's good for your children to hear, I'll be good for my children to hear. If you think the truth will damage your children, you must see what the lie has done to damage our children. When I talk to educators, I tell them this all the time. I say, when you teach folk, you got to make your classroom relevant. If the black kid ain't nowhere in the classroom, I go to sleep too. If the black kid is nowhere in the classroom, I wouldn't like the class either. I wouldn't like it. If I was in the classroom and I was nowhere in that classroom or in that school, I walk into school, all I see is white pictures on the wall, I'd have a problem with that because that means you don't respect me. And see, when you start teaching critical race theory, it's going to require a transformative change. It's going to require institutions to change. And folks, we're seeing that all over the world. We're seeing it especially in Atlanta with the renaming of streets that were named Confederate names. And black people living on them now. Miss Queen said, hide the history and we'll repeat it. Well, exactly. Hide the history. Well, the thing about it, I have to say this, folk, and I can't, you can't blame folk for all of our stuff. You ain't got to hide it because black folk oftentimes don't want to look at their history. We've gotten up to a point in our lives where we say, listen, that's in the past. But Jewish people don't say that. They say we're going to learn this stuff. At least it never happened again. So it's not that Jewish people are proud of what happened. They're saying they will never allow it to happen again. But when it comes to black people and the black experience, others say, y'all need to forget that and move on. I hope you all are seeing this critical race theory, me making it very simple. But it seems like such a big issue. Now, what's so interesting about this, when you talk about the truth, right? The truth. Let's just talk about what the truth is. Now, my responsibility here tonight is to make you aware of what CRT is, our critical race theory, let you know what the opposition thinks about it, and what should happen. What whites don't want you to know. Now, don't forget, I gave you a precursor. I'm not going to keep saying this. Because I love black people don't mean I hate white people. Because white people love white people don't mean they hate black people. I want to get us beyond that point of, I can't say I love me because you're offended by it. Get over it. I can't say I love black people because you're offended. All right, that's insane. And I'm a therapist. All right. What people don't want you to know is how blacks or how Africans got to America. They don't want you to know how we got to America. It wasn't on a cruise line, on a ship. It took months to get to the shore. They had us packed on those ships and shackled on planks, like laying right beside each other and defecating on this ship and urinating on this ship and eating food with the animals. I mean, human beings. We were a commodity. We were viewed as commodity. And I suspect the pigs were treated better than we were. So during the voyage here, there were many illnesses and diseases. So many didn't make the trip. During the middle, now see, this is what people don't want you to know. Our kids to know. But I think if our kids heard this, they stay awake. I think if white children heard this, they stay awake. During the Middle Passage, The Middle Passage was from Africa to the islands to the Americas. Over 8 million people, 8 million human beings died. They were thrown in the ocean for the sharks to eat. 8 million people died in the Middle Passage. And some of them said, before I be made a slave, I'll just jump overboard if I can. 8 million human beings lost their life in the Middle Passage. And there's a belief that the reason all the hurricanes come off the eastern tip of Africa and travel that same route, the Middle Passage, they say because our ancestors are angry at what happened and are honoring those 8 million dead people at the bottom of that ocean. Kind of interesting, isn't it? But those 8 million lives were lost by somebody's hand. Somebody caused that to happen. Somebody caused 8 million black folk, African, adult men, women, and children died in the Middle Passage. See, folks, this is what the CRT is all about. This is what critical race theory is all about. We're talking about not just telling the story to black children, we're talking about telling the story to all children because they would get a greater appreciation for what we bring to these shores beyond our brilliance. They want to tell the white kids about slavery, how they breeded us as animals, how we were given the intestines and the leftover from animals that they wouldn't eat, how they breeded us like you all breed dogs, how they have men having sex with women just to have babies and have babies after babies after babies. And then they take those babies, feed them like they're feeding a pig, and then sell them to the highest bidder. There are husbands and wives that were split up, and how the wife had to see her husband have sex with another woman just because she could have a baby. This is what people did to us. But yet there are proponents who say they don't want their kids to hear this stuff because they'll feel like the villains. No, the kids are smarter than that. They won't feel like the villains. They'll see that their ancestors were terrorists. Those kids ain't gonna feel like no villains. They're gonna denounce it. The young people of today would denounce that and say, why we didn't know the story. They were terrorists. Anyone who goes somewhere else and take people against their will, they're terrorists. Now, there are some who say, well, guess what? They didn't take all of them. Some of them were sold. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Some were sold. They were sold for guns and they were sold for the whiskey. They were sold for a number of reasons. That still does not validate the terrorist act that occurred. You see, this is what critical race theory is about. Then there is much more. It's about the torment and rape. See, the problem is we can't talk about being a moral society when the society was started immorally. Are y'all with me? It's hard to talk about you're this moralistic society when you did everything you're telling people that was immoral. That you tormented human beings, that you raped human beings, that you tore families apart, that you killed children. And then our history and our culture was stolen. It was murder. And the question is, why is it so profound now? It's profound because in 2021, over 200 black people were killed by police officers, unarmed. Not just, but George Floyd. That was George Floyd's death was the pinnacle, and it was the resurgence of critical race theory, because something is wrong. How can another human being put their knee on another human being and hear them say, "I cannot breathe," and ignore them? Well, guess what? The same thing happened on the master's plantation. The same thing. And when I think about that, I say that when the plantation owners would catch an African who was trying to escape, he would hang him on a tree, split him in half, and then make the other Africans look at it. So the message on their brain and the imprint on their brain was, you better not even try this, because this is going to happen to you. And when I look at the George Floyd situation, it was the same imprinting that said, don't mess with us. If you try, the same thing is going to happen to you. We're talking about critical race theory. And Janae, good seeing you again. She said, yes, the cycle repeated. And I see Barbara West says, a lot of younger whites see it already. It impacted the Black Lives Matter and voting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you look, when you start looking at voting in the United States, guess what? I'm still trying to say, why we gotta reenact a law for human beings to vote? Gotta be part of the Constitution. It should be. We should have to vote on that. It's a human right. All right, how are y'all doing? How are y'all doing with this critical race theory? When you talk about, they don't want their children to hear about our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. They don't want their children to hear that the Star-Spangled Banner was written by a prosecutor in Washington who was a racist pro-slavery. Y'all hear me? He wrote this song, Francis Scott Key. He wrote this song, but he wrote the song now. But he was a racist. And he was for slavery. So then you ask the question, why do black folk not want to stand when they hear the hear the Star-Spangled Banner? That's the reason. That's the reason I want to stand. That's why Carpenter, that's why he knelt on his knee. He said, I'm not standing for that song. That song is against us. But see, they don't want to hear the rationalization for why black people behave the way they behave. We just anti-American, unpatriotic, just all that. But they forgot that black folk fought in the army and the military and helped save this country and lost their lives. How are you unpatriotic and some of your kids didn't even go to the military? You lied and said they could not go. See, these are the kind of conversations. And really, it's an academic conversation. It should happen in our educational system. These are academic conversations. Can you imagine if this kind of stuff was taught, how energized the classroom would be? Now, it may be too energized because some kids don't know how to handle this stuff. They just want to fight and beat up people, talking about, your ancestors did this to me, someone beat you up, And during Black History Month, a lot of that goes on. But my whole point is that if we taught it throughout the year, we would not have this crescendo effect. It would not be the shock. Now I'm going to beat your ass for bothering us. You see, it would not be that crescendo effect. Are y'all with me? So of course you can tell that I'm for it, because I'd be not me to say I don't want the black perspective taught in schools while all other perspectives are taught. All right, I'm giving y'all a little history lesson. Francis Scott Key, the Star-Spangled Banner, oh say can you see, was a racist. And he was for slavery. There are folk, ready for this one, there are 36 states that have introduced bills that would restrict teaching critical race theory in the classroom. 36 states have already introduced bills that will outlaw teaching critical race theory. For example, a new bill that was proposed in New Hampshire bans the teaching of any doctrine or theory promoting a negative account or representation of the founding and the history of the United States of America. I got to read that again. I want y'all to hear this now. These are people who have systematically lied for a cover-up, and now they want to use their legal system, which is a flawed system, to stop education. In New Hampshire, there's a bill to ban the teaching of any doctrine or theory promoting a negative account or representation of the founding and the history of the United States. So in other words, I don't want to hear your story, but you must hear my story from my perspective. Let me break it down a little bit better for you. So I want you to hear my lie, which is a white lie, and I want you to believe it. Don't question it. Act like you have amnesia. Act like you ain't much here. You ain't even a part of it. Just go with the flow. How absurd is that? How absurd is that? And see, that's where the fear comes in. That's where the fear comes in with coloration. That's where the fear comes in with the number of minorities in this country. And there is a proponent of people who are afraid that this country has become too colored. And I don't mean with colored folk. I don't mean like with black folk. I mean with brown and yellow people. Because they're going to lose control. Deborah said, she said it's about power and the need to recognize it. They're going to lose control, and they're losing control. So they're doing everything. People, guess what? Trying to take over the elections, trying to give state legislators the right to overturn elections in states. Is this the United States of America, or is this a third world country? We had people killed and fought against this for other people to have democracy. Ms. Queen said they wanted to tell all the good stuff about America from their perspective, but nothing negative. We as a people are strong enough to handle the truth. So, Mr. Queen, it's not about us being strong enough to handle the truth. It's that they're not strong enough to handle the truth. That's the issue. It's not us being strong enough. It is them not being strong enough. And they want to blame it on their children, saying, oh, it's going to hurt their children. But guess what? Their children can handle it. But they don't want their children to see that their ancestry were terrorists, killed people, and still today are serving as subliminal terrorists to black folk. What is terrorist? When you control where I stay, when you control what I make, when you control my image, when you control all of that. In other words, you got me hostage. Well, you know, the thing about it, I'm going to move on. You know, it's kind of interesting that I've discovered that education is critically important in this country. Education is critically important, and I am a supporter of black folk and all people getting the highest degree you can get. But don't get it twisted. Degrees don't make you. As long as you're in America, you can have the highest degree. You're still going to be treated second class. I have the highest degree you can get. I have a doctorate. And still, I struggle. Still, I have to prove myself. And there are places who don't want to even honor my doctorate. Well, we ain't going to call you that because we only honor MDs. What kind of insane foolishness is that? Faithful Father said, modern day Pharaoh. I couldn't have said it better. Modern day Pharaoh. All right, we're moving along. And Jackie, I don't know what happened to her, but she's not on yet. I mean, well, at this point, we're closing out. All right, ready? What is the attack about? The attack. What is the critical race theory attack about? Overall, the attack on critical race theory should be taken for what it is. It's an attempt to censor what is being taught to children in public schools across the country. It's a censorship. Well, wait a minute. Wasn't it something that said we had a right to speak and express ourselves? Wasn't it something that said that? But here we are now. Our legislative bodies are wanting to censor education. Folk, we're talking about critical race theory tonight. What is it really all about? And what it's really all about, it's not about us. It's really about how others perceive us and want to control us by continuing controlling all the institutions that form a society. There was one unknown author who said, a civilized society is known by how it takes care of its children. And my question is, so did that include black children? So if we're based upon being a civilized society, it's based upon how we take care of our children, well, we're not civilized because a set of kids are being taken care of and a set of kids are not being taken care of. And I ain't talking about handouts. I'm talking about education. I'm talking about fairness and equality. I'm talking about a self-worth. I'm talking about economics. People, as you can assume, these kind of bills have sparked all kinds of controversy across the country. Many people, including the teachers, argue that this would be a concerning amount of censorship about school classrooms if these legislative bodies are successful. Would teachers not be allowed to teach accurate representation in history class? Would they have to sugarcoat topics to make the white children feel better? Now, this is out of a report that Megan had written, Megan Horan. So it appears that all these issues are about critical race theory from the other perspective has nothing to do with the black experience and our children. It's still about protecting white people. How patriarchal is that? You know, it's still in 2022. We still got to consider massa before we consider ourselves. I mean, people, this is disheartening to me. At 65 years old, I have been fighting this battle for over 40 years. And here I am at 65, still talking the same stuff. You know why? Because oftentimes we can talk it, but unfortunately, we don't impact institutions. That's why we can't be racist. You're only racist when what your dislike impacts the lives of others. You're only racist when what you say and think impacts the lives of others based upon their race. There's nothing black folk can do about racism other than talk about it. Now, please, I'm not saying, let's sit down and be passive. I'm talking about on large scales. Everybody wants to bring up Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, fine. I get it. I understand it. I get it. But guess what? There's a whole lot more. There was a whole lot more, and it was before Dr. King. It was a whole lot more before Dr. King. So I think Jackie's coming on. We're about to close out, but we have to have her if she's on anyway. Jackie, are you there?
She is on, Dr. Miles. Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
I'm gonna say good night.
Apologies.
I'm gonna say good night to you because we have covered this thing, and I'm gonna tell you what I told them. I'm allowing you to give some closing remarks. I was simply saying that critical race theory is very, very simple. This is what it's about. Critical race theory is about a perspective. It's a racial perspective from a Black perspective. Theory is about having multiple perspectives. The argument is from other people that they do not want the Black perspective taught because it does harm to white children.
Right. And honestly, Dr. Miles, I think that sums it up. Were it not for that very point of being concerned about the harm that it.
Okay, she was trying to join. It says she's not joining, so we're going to keep it moving, folks. I want to say at this point, I just hope that each of you all have really gotten a perspective from this. And I'm hoping that each of you all now really understand what critical race theory is. And as you hear it, you won't be saying, what is that all about? It is about not wanting history, racial history, to be taught from a Black perspective. And as one researcher said, it was about censoring. It's about censoring what is being taught. It's about censoring what is being taught in the schools. And he wants nothing negative about the American history, nothing negative about American history to be taught. Nothing negative about American history to be taught. Jack, are you there?
I am here. We're going to try it again. It just kind of booted me out.
No, but we can hear you. Just, let's keep going because we have like about maybe 8 more minutes. Really about
okay.
5.
Okay. What I was saying before, Dr. Miles, is that your statement really sums it up. The issue over, quote unquote, teaching critical race theory is the fact that there is concern of what it will do to, non-Black students and non-Black adults. Within that, of course, is a complete ignoring of, what it has done to Black people and Black children. That alone, what I heard you saying about it being just history. It is just factual history. It is American history. And so you're suggesting all of a sudden, which is the absurd part, that American history shouldn't be taught in American schools. So we give it a fancy name, we politicize it, but that is the message.
And true American history.
True American history.
But what's so interesting, though, what's so interesting about this is that this whole cover-up goes beyond America. It goes beyond America. It goes back even to the lie of who the pharaohs were. The cannons to shoot off the nose so that somebody, I think they were Black, and how in the Catholic Church they remove all the Black angels and put them in the basements. Are you with me?
I am.
So it's all part of a cover-up.
A Eurocentric perspective that is still being.
But Jackie, also when you start looking at this, the cover-up, and this is what critical race theory would also talk about, is how the inventions, how Black folk and a lot of this, and white folk got the credit for it.
And I agree with you. That really is part of the cover-up as well. It's like saying, listen, we know this happened, but we're just not ready to take the cover off of this. We really are not ready to be real. And Dr. Miles, what that says to me, we often talk about other countries, especially North Korea, and how other countries are limited and how their media is controlled. But it clearly says that we're starting to do the same media and education here in the United States. Therein lies the danger.
And it's because of the fear, as Deborah said on our Facebook, the loss of power, And Jackie, I was going to say that not only they're not ready for it, they will never be ready for it because,
Exactly.
Jackie, what it will show, and I said this earlier, it will show that they were terrorists. They were
Period.
inhumane.
That they right. They were inhumane. They did things now that they like to, they did things then that they condemn now so publicly and wholeheartedly. But unfortunately, this was not just practiced in America, it was law. And I think that you're right. That is the fear. You're really taking the cover off. You're looking at these quote unquote founding fathers or the families that existed then, knowing that like us, they have descendants who are still here today, and acknowledging just barbaric treatment. But it also goes as recent as the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, when these things led to public lynchings. It's just inhumane treatment that they really don't want exposed. And again, it's at the cost of truth and the wellness of people of color.
Well, Jackie, I said earlier before you came on, I said it becomes a conflict between this moral society and their immorality.
Right. Right.
You know,
Just, and it's almost an understatement. Elise has made some very interesting comments too, that they don't want to admit how calculated and systematic these issues are that this country is built on. And I think that is also true. I mean, that is critical race theory, the calculated behavior and
it's
the systemic behavior that we still see, because, to acknowledge the past is to connect it to the present. So if you don't want to acknowledge that, unfortunately, we still live in a racist society, you certainly don't want to go back and talk about where it all began.
Well, the thing about it is, I talked about those 8 million people who died in the Middle Passage. I won't cover it again just for you, but I want you to know that, that I covered that whole thing. And I wanted our audience to understand when they leave tonight that it's not just about in a classroom book. It's about for them to understand. So as they begin to vote for legislators, they need to vote for legislators who are going to approve critical race theory. But there is a move across this country that all these state houses will be occupied by people who don't want this to happen.
Who will not cover it. Exactly. And I think it also says, Dr. Miles, that we need to seek the knowledge ourselves. Sometimes these things prevail because there are many people of color who also don't want to know and deal with this truth. But as we talk about mental wellness, understanding these histories plays a part in that. It plays a part in the stress that we deal with every day. So it really is vital information, whether it's taught in a K-12 environment or not. This is information that needs to be sought and needs to be shared, no matter how.
The truth be told, we're talking about the past and the history, right? But it still prevails today.
Absolutely.
It wears a different suit. It has a different voice. But guess what? As Elise said, the institutions have been built. And those institutions have been built to deprive Black people. It's been deprived to keep Black people in their place. And the laws are designed the same. The laws are designed the same. So critical race theory goes across a very...
Go ahead.
Go on.
I was going to say, we have to add this too, realizing that our awareness, right? Our awareness does eliminate a lot of that power. When we know the truth, right? I mean, as a society, not just as people of color, but it takes the veil off many of these systems. When that truth is out there, it changes the landscape completely.
Okay. But we got to go. Our time is up. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I won't see you next week. We're going to take off next week, but my time is running out. Jackie, thanks for at least rushing to be on. Thank you. I'm going to sign off before it cuts us off. All right?
Good night, everyone.